I guess maybe I should give this introduction before we just charge right in. So Howard Weiner is back on Working Man's Pod today. It is he and I talking about the Dead and Company's show at Cornell, which was great, and Howard was in Ithaca for it, and also Howard's new book, which is very exciting that it is now out. The Grateful Pilgrimage: Time Travel with the Dead, right?
Correct. Yeah.
It came out yesterday, and so if I'm in the Hartford chapter, I'm about 40% through, I would say. But
Yeah, almost half. You're almost halfway home.
the fact that I've read that much in one day should tell you everything you need to know about this book, everyone. You should go pick it up. It's a great read. Howard's typical great writing and, intertwining pieces of yourself and your own history and the things that you're thinking about and feeling right now with, great stories about the Grateful Dead and your kind of analysis of the music of their fall tour of 1983. I'm loving it so far.
Hey, it's pretty cool. The idea, I guess I'm a pioneer doing this. I don't know if anyone's ever done this kind of thing before, which made it instantly attractive. Like I had to do it. So it's kind of dueling road trips where I go back to all the spots of the 1983 fall tour. Yeah, I go back to Richmond, Greensboro, Madison Square Garden, all in order on the anniversary dates. And I try to get in there, listen to the music, and reflect back on what was happening, as well as bringing you up to date on what's going on in 2022 and all the weird changes in the world over 40 years.
Yeah, it's interesting. There are a lot of themes that I've already picked up on in just the part that I've read. What you're just talking about, there's a bit of nostalgia. Obviously, you're going back in time and thinking about, where was I? What was I doing when I was at this show? Who was I with? And then what's it like now? A lot of the venues have, stopped hosting concerts, because it's not just the venues that you went to in fall 83. You also stop at a bunch of other venues along the way that you had seen the Dead or JGB at. And so it's kind of cool that you even broadened your horizons out beyond that fall 83 tour.
Yeah, it's a pilgrimage, so it's definitely, it feels religious when you're listening to the Grateful Dead and you're following around and you're going back to old times. To me, it's bigger than religion. I got to be honest about that. So I think the word pilgrimage fits it pretty good. And on the off days in the tour, I have plenty of time to do some things. So I figured, hey, that'd be cool to check out nearby venues. So I go to Lehigh, Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Garcia played there. The Grateful Dead played there in 1981. And it must have been incredible for the students in Lehigh that year. And I go to a 77 show in Colgate, but I guess it all kicked off with Barton Hall. I went up to Barton Hall last year, 2022, on May 8th, because I was being interviewed that day on Tales for the Golden Road, Mr. David Gans and Gary Lambert. And I just had this inspired inclination to do this, man. I was like, this is not enough. I just can't go to Barton Hall and really relive the magic of that. Why not do a whole tour? And thankfully, I went through with it, man. Sometimes when you have an idea, even if it seems silly or whatever, nobody's done it before, those are probably the ones you should pounce on and go through with it.
Absolutely. You had a line in the book where you kind of made a similar point about, you got to pounce on it before it disappears.
Oh, exactly. I was really excited about it, but then something happened in my life and I was kind of caught up in that. I'm making money. I got a new job. I'm doing good. And I said, I got to put this off. And then all of a sudden, 3 weeks before, I was like, what the hell am I thinking, man? This will be more fun than a vacation to Mexico or wherever I might take a vacation. I was like, this is like an active participant vacation as opposed to sitting back on a beach somewhere. So I was like, I actually got excited to do this kind of as a vacation.
Hell yeah. And life is short. If you have a great idea like this, why not? I mean, I'm sure you've been hearing maybe some trickles of feedback. It's only been out for a day, so people probably haven't had time to read the whole thing just yet. But I think the response is going to be really good, just because it is such a good idea. And then your execution, in my opinion, is also excellent. One thing I wanted to ask about the execution is, did you write a lot of this while you were traveling, or was it more taking notes and then kind of consolidating it and really doing more of the writing after the trip?
Yeah, it's definitely the note taking. I break out my iPhone. I got a little. It's actually called Notes. That little notes thing on the iPhone. It's invaluable. So I always do my books on there. Even if I'm like listening to music, I'm going to write about it. I jot down the notes, and then later on I have this serious sit down writing session where I try to present it as most compelling as I can. Definitely a good way of doing it. If you're writing something, don't worry too much about getting it right the first time. Just get all the facts down, put it somewhere, and then go back and get to it.
That makes sense. The chapter in Harrisburg, you talk about someone like looking over your shoulder and seeing that you had written pilgrimage, not pilgrimage.
That was pretty funny. It was nice to know that somebody was eavesdropping on my writing. I'm sitting there at the bar. A nice looking woman too. I'm like, it's like, come on, you're eavesdropping on what I'm writing. But she eavesdropped and she was correct. I misspelled pilgrimage as pilgrimage, and she said her father was really into like pork and pigs and all that. I'm like, geez, that's a good idea for like people who are really nutty about roast pork and sausage and all that. A pilgrimage, It's,
Yeah. Yeah, it's not bad. But yeah, there's that. And then there was a part when you were in the city and you were talking about ducking into a place in Manhattan that you had enjoyed writing. And in my head, I was like, man, was he writing all of this as he was going? I feel like that would be so challenging, but this makes more sense to me. Getting the facts down and then you have your real in-depth writing sessions after the fact.
that was pretty cool going back to New York City, man. The memories that uncorks. Like I lived in Manhattan for about 20 years, and that's the world. There's nothing but Manhattan when you live there, and when you leave, you're on the outside. It's like either you're totally sucked into the Manhattan experience or you're on the outside. So when I came back, man, it just blew my mind. And then let alone thinking about 1983, what New York City was like back then, and going to those Madison Square Garden shows, man, it was an incredible time, man. New York City was a crazy place back then, and it was kind of dangerous. And when we were
Yeah.
touring in '83, but that first night they played St. Stephen, man, just oh my god, it was so exciting. And one of the things that was out there, they had sound checked it in Greensboro the night before, and but I had heard so many St. Stephen rumors that it was persistent for like a year. But by the time that show came, I had totally given up. I was like, they're never playing St. Stephen. So it totally, even though the rumors were out there, it totally caught me off guard because I had officially given up hoping for St. Stephen. Then they broke it out that night, and just it was so overwhelming and exciting. It was almost hard to enjoy in the moment because my friends there were grabbing each other and punching each other, because it's like, is this real? We're here in St. Stephen. It was like that exciting, but turns out to be a pretty great performance on listen back. It's for a 1983 version, they really kind of nailed it that night.
Oh yeah, completely agree. And that's one of the highlights of that box set that came out last year, I think, was that St. Stephen.
And the first set's very good too. A funny thing I'll mention about that show and being like a crazy fan and maybe even taking it perhaps a little too seriously was I get to the show and I walk in on Jack Straw, very hot Jack Straw, and I'm having a great time. And Bird Song and the set rolls along and they end with a bucket day job. And it seems like a 7-song set. And I am freaking pissed, man, because I took this stuff seriously, man. It was like, this was life and death to me. And I'm not like, I'm trying to turn to my friend like, that sucked. And like, but actually, like, and then that's later on, they play St. Stephen. They do a great second set. But it was kind of funny how passionate we were about what they were playing and the outcome, which I'm not as outcome orientated these days as I used to be. But it turns out that day, they kind of started earlier than usual. And they actually opened up with Wang Dang Doodle. So it makes the first set even better than it appeared at the time. And listening to on tape, everything's sizzling. It's like a beautiful first set to listen to.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know, did you go to either of the Dead and Coast City Field shows last year? They were. I had a blast. I think that second one was the most fun I've ever had at a Dead and Coast show. The crowd was great. Not too much like talking around me, so I could really focus on the music. Everyone was in it. People were singing along like every word, and it was just a packed house at City Field. And I've listened to it since, and Bob's voice was really rough that night. End of the tour, his voice was a little bit scratchy. I could not have told you that. I was having too good of a time to even notice something like that. So it's kind of interesting that you had the inverse experience where you were like, man, that wasn't even that good. But then after the fact, you listened to it and you're like, what was I thinking? This was amazing.
It's so true. Yeah. And also when you hear a true masterpiece live, sometimes you can't even if you know it's great, it's even hard to take in the magnitude of it. And like that I think that was the way it was for me. I think two of the greatest versions I've ever heard in my life are from that '83 tour, which is why one of the reasons I chose that one to revisit. You got the Help Slip Franklin's from October 12th, which is just ridiculous. I think that it's the best version ever. Uh, from the time Jerry stopped the last verse of Help on the Way to the first verse of Franklin's, I call that the best 10 minutes of music I ever saw live. To me, it's that impressive. And then in Franklin's, which is kind of it's a redundant song. It's the same chord over and over. To be creative on every jam in Franklin's is near impossible. Jerry nailed every freaking jam on that Franklin's. It's incredible.
Yeah.
So and then the Scarlet Fire from Hartford, which Dick released as Volume 6. He was right on the money. He knew it. It was a great. The first set's pretty standard, but the second set they played standard stuff too. But some of the best versions you'll ever hear. That Scarlet Fire is brilliant. And yeah, so that tour really had some incredible like masterpiece stuff, and also at that period you did have some shorter first sets than usual. There were, it definitely, you're not going to say it's the best year ever, but some of the versions they came out with in '83 was just top notch stuff.
Yeah, well, I've really been enjoying reading it so far. I'm excited to finish the book and to go back and listen to more of those shows from '83 because the only ones I've heard so far are the MSG shows. So I'm looking forward to, doing some more exploration inspired by your writing.
Did you get a chance to get the Dick Spix Volume 6? Have you ever heard that one? Or
Yeah, I have, but not in a long time. I listened to all 36 probably a year and a half ago. I haven't revisited it since then.
Yeah, so the first set on that one is pretty typical. No reason to get excited. You wouldn't think a great show is coming. The second set, off the hook. It's just that every version is incredible. So
Nice.
I think it was on the money when he picked something. There was a reason for it, and there's always there was something stand out. He really was a great archivist, man. He knew his stuff, as is Lemieux. Yeah. But it's Dick had first crack at the at the great shows.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm going to come back to the book with a couple questions at the end of our time together, but I do want to talk about Barton Hall because 5877 and Barton Hall cast a shadow over your book. You start out talking about the trip that you took there last year and the fact that you went there in 2015 or 17.
15, well.
Yeah. And then you went there was it 2 days ago for the Dead & Co show? Yeah, Monday. So this was the first time though that you've been there with a crowd of heads and been able to share your time at Barton Hall with more like-minded people. And I'm curious what that was like compared to your other trips there.
Hey, it was pretty incredible. And just to play off what you just said is last year I was the only deadhead in Barton Hall. Yeah, I was playing basketball in Barton Hall. I listened to the entire show in Barton Hall. I was having the greatest time, and I never could have dreamed. On that day, I thought of the Grateful Pilgrimage and writing the book, so that's where the seed was planted. Mm-hmm. But I never could have dreamed that Dead & Co would never play Barton Hall. It's too small. It was an impossibility, but it happened. And so yeah, it was pretty amazing. It was a great scene. The town was just flooded with deadheads, but it wasn't like an obtrusive of invasion, which it could have been. Yeah. I think the ticket prices kept away there would have been 10 times as many people if the ticket prices weren't like, as much as they were. So it was very cool. It was such a nice scene. Everybody there was great. There was nothing heavy handed, no cops, no security was nice. Everybody was very welcoming. And also I had this incredible experience. I think you might've seen the picture online. I'm in the Marriott Hotel and I'm about to go downtown Ithaca. This is before the day before the show. And I had some kind of gut feeling. I was like, let me see what's going on in the lobby. I thought maybe there'd be somebody there I could tell about my book or, I was thinking small, but I had like this gut feeling to go to the lobby. I go to the lobby, a guy calls me over. He goes, take a look at this. I thought he was going to show me a bag of marijuana or something. It's freaking Jerry's Travis Bean that he used in Cornell. And wow. I looked at it, I was like, holy shit, I think this is it. This guy's not putting me on. Is it the $1 million Jerry's guitar that he also used in Englishtown? And it was incredible. I think one other person besides me got to take a picture with it. And then he went to like a VIP reception after. But I checked everything up. Before I put the picture online, I wanted to make sure this was the guitar and everything was legitimate. He checked out. He owns guitars by Springsteen and other famous rockers. So but incredible. I couldn't believe, and had I gone straight to downtown Ithaca, I wouldn't have ran into that. So that was just very cool seeing the guitar, man. It was uh, obviously unexpected.
And amazing. I mean, that's fantastic. So you got up the day before the show, and then you stayed. Did you stay the night of the show too, or did you drive back home
I
after the show?
drove back home the night of the show, which
Okay.
I had to pull over and do some sleeping on the side. It was, yeah, there wasn't like after the show, it was a little chilly out, so there wasn't much of a scene. There wasn't a shakedown, so it was a little unusual, not the typical scene, but it was extremely cool. I think it was a nice breath of fresh air from the usual scene. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, that is cool. It sounds like maybe the pre-show scene was more like those 83 shows where you talk about like this special secret brotherhood, compared to then when the touch heads started to invade the scene in the later 80s and the early 90s, and it became more of a crazy scene.
Exactly. It's that's just part of life when people get bigger, stars, whatever. The scene changes. In 1983, if you were a Deadhead, you knew something other people didn't know. Yeah, you were cool. You had a great taste in music. These days, it's still true these days, but I'd say, well, what do you think? Like 100 times what the amount of people are into it than were
Yeah.
back then.
Yeah, definitely.
Like a whole legion of Deadheads and people who appreciate the music who never seen the Grateful Dead. But look at this great show is great podcast is a great example of that, man. Like you're so into it, you totally get it. But and I guess the popularity is it's a great thing for that purpose. But back in the day, it was like it's like we knew something. We had the bootleg tapes. The rest of the world was in the dark. So so if
Yeah.
you were a Deadhead and you knew the music, like you let somebody stay at your house, you could walk into their circle and smoke their pot, even if you didn't know them. It was like these were the cool people. They knew the secret.
It's not like today when you see someone, like LeBron James walked into a game with a Dancing Bear shirt on. There's no way he knows the Dead's music. He just isn't it for the fashion. There wasn't that in 83. It wouldn't have been like cool in the mainstream culture like that. It was a special thing for the people who knew.
Yeah, and you might see Bill Walton in a bear shirt. That was about it for
That was
NBA
about
players.
it. Yeah. So, okay, let's talk about this show at Cornell, because did you listen to it when you and I were emailing? You said that you listened to it like outside the venue because, like you said, the tickets were obscenely expensive. So, were you just like listening to it with other people on the grounds?
Exactly. So, like, I'm not a great authority to go to on what I think of the show because I caught parts of it. I caught really good.
Okay.
I was locked for a large part of the second set. I was locked in. It was great.
Okay.
The instrumentation was just brilliant. But and the song selection was like the odd thing, which I thought was like all Jerry tunes in that second set, man. It was like China Cat Rider, Helps of Frank, Scarlet Fire, and Morning Dew. And I did predict, I didn't think they'd do the whole show, but I did predict they would play Scarlet Fire and Morning Dew, and they did it. Because those were like
Yes, they did.
the big hitters from that 77 show. So they touched on Cornell enough without having to play the whole show, which was very cool.
Totally agree. I think it was a great balance.
Yeah, so yeah, the playing was really great. What I heard, and I kind of missed a lot of the first set. I was moving around. People were talking to me because I was promoting the book, so I didn't have my lockdown like usual. Listen to the music, but I think that's going to change 5 o'clock today. I think they're playing it on Sirius,
Yeah.
on the Grateful Dead channel. So I think tonight I'm going to take a lockdown and listen to the whole thing, and like I normally would with good loud speakers going. And
Right on. Well, because our audience may not know, let me read the set list in full, and then we can talk about a couple of the high points, especially of that second set, because that was unreal. So they started the show just like the Grateful Dead did on 5/8/77 with New Minglewood Blues. Then they played Althea, which didn't even exist in 77. Then Estimated Profit, which they did play on 5/8/77, into Eyes of the World, which they didn't. Jack Straw, Cassidy, and they closed out the first set with Deal. Then the second set, you nailed it.
can I ask you a question on that first set?
Yeah.
How was the Jack Straw?
It was good. I mean, the Estimated Profit for me was the high point of set one. Mayer was on fire, and O'Teal had some really cool runs on his bass too, and Chimenti had a great solo too. But the Jack Straw was still good. I didn't have any specific notes on it as I look at my little pad here.
Yeah, it sounded like Estimated was the ripper of I think I did hear the estimated. During the first set, I was doing various things, but I think I do remember hearing that.
The second set, I mean, it's just a monster. You said it. China Rider, Help Slip Franklin, Drums in Space, then Scarlet Fire and Morning Dew. And then an encore of Terrapin.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Right.
Like it's unreal.
Geez, man. Inside there must have been like fever pitch because yeah, they were the best Dead and Company could be. That's what they gave you in
Yeah.
that second set.
It was unbelievable. I mean, a couple other things to note about it. They played for 3 hours and 27 minutes. And that's just the music. I'm not including like the set break and stuff. So that's longer than 14 of the 22 Europe 72 shows. It's 45 minutes longer than Cornell 77. These guys played forever.
Yeah, well, that's why they couldn't recreate the Cornell show because they would have been there for like 10 hours if they did the entire Cornell show. But it's amazing, man. It's funny that they get a little criticism for playing a little slower, but nothing felt when I was listening, nothing felt dragged out. It was brilliant. It was good stuff, man.
Yeah, yeah, I thought so too. I will say a couple other monster performances from Cornell 77. That Lazy Lightning and Supplication is amazing. The Dancing in the Street is an all-timer for that song, I think. Not Fade Away and St. Stephen, also epic, but I didn't miss them on this set because they played the songs that they did play so well.
Everything was great, and it was good that they didn't have to follow that script. That was what it was. They kind of created their own history with paying a little homage to the past. To touch off your point, like the reason Cornell gets like this overrated, the 77, why there's this argument over the greatness of it. The first set of that Cornell show was just average for 77, which means it's great. But it didn't have a sugary, it didn't have a Music Never Stopped, it didn't have an Eyes of the World, so it's which would have been a second set song. It's missing some of the big hitters from that year, so that's why there's good arguments to say that there's better shows than Cornell. But that second set, man, that is a special piece of music. The second set from 5/8/77. There's longer sets, but it's one of those perfect sets. Forget the time. It goes beyond description, man. It's brilliant. I'll tell you, the first time I heard it, I write about this in the book also. I'm going to the dentist with my father. My father isn't a Grateful Dead fan. He's barely a music fan, but he understood that when we were driving somewhere, I controlled the music. So I had just gotten to the Dead. This is like my sixth tape, and my friend Doug didn't even give me a build up on Cornell. He was like, here you go, here's a hot tape. At that point, it didn't have the legendary, and I put it in, and in the morning I did a couple bong hits. This is what I did when I was 16. Bong hits in the morning, and I'm listening to this skull, blown away, man. I was like, it was the most incredible thing I'd ever heard in my life, and it was our trip to the dentist was to Yonkers, New York, Dr. Lasner. So it's 30 minutes. The trip was perfect for the Scarlet Fire. I was blown away, man. I couldn't believe it. It's such a great Scarlet Fire, and there was something about it. I heard some great Grateful Dead at that time. I heard English Town, and I was getting into them. But like to me, that was on top of the mountain. It was so crazy good. I was just wow. So even though it has like its reputation precedes it, Cornell, there's magic there, which I had no idea of the reputation when I put the tape in. It didn't even have a reputation really at that time. And it was an audience version. It was a very good audience recording. So it blew me away. And I put it on a pedestal before it was, before it became what it was. And I think the reason there was a lot of feedback against it. If you look at Dead Base, which was the encyclopedia for the Grateful Dead, especially in the early 80s, in the late 80s, early 90s, every song from 5/8/77 was rated the best, which is completely inaccurate. So people would see that this isn't the greatest Jack Straw of all time, and I think that led to some of the Cornell being overrated. But regardless of what you think about it, it's part of folklore. Dead and Company helped make it even a bigger part of folklore now. It's Barn Hall is the most famous concert they ever played.
Yeah.
Even probably outdoing Veneta or
English Town.
English Town.
Watkins
Definitely outdoing
Glen.
English Town because English Town it was great. It had the 200,000 people there and everything about it. But as far as folklore goes, Barnwell's got it.
Yeah. One of my friends is a huge Led Zeppelin fan, and he was like talking about how he's like, if you want to find like the best Zeppelin shows, find their shows in New York, LA, Seattle. Like when they were in big cities, they turned it up a notch. And I was like, I think that that's actually the argument of why the Dead were a more special live act, because their two most famous shows are in Veneta, Oregon and Ithaca, New York. You just never knew when those guys were going to absolutely bring it. It didn't matter if they were in New York City or if they were in Greensboro or Columbia, South Carolina. The show before you went to one in Richmond that you talk about in the book that was released, I think is Dick's Picks 21. It's just a special show. You know, they brought it wherever they were.
And yeah, it's like you think about Veneta, that hippie, naked hippie behind the pole
Yeah,
dancing. You don't get that at a Led Zeppelin show either.
I don't
But
think so.
yeah, yeah. So one thing you mentioned about where they bring it, my second chapter, and you showed some interest in this, was on Music Mountain, 6/16/82, and that you would even, it's a place that's unknown, but just 6/16/82 Music Mountain. If you looked at a list, that would probably pop out at you. You would say this is probably a great show, and it's one of the great Jerry band shows of all time. And part of the pilgrimage before I actually went on the '83 tour, we went back to the Catskills, and we found the stage where Jerry played on in Music Mountain, and it's just sitting there. I think a Chinese or Korean guy has some stuff on the stage. Somebody I think owns it. It's unbelievable it's not demolished, or a concert hasn't been on there in 38 years. It's just sitting there. And we found it. It was like the most uh, arcane thing I've ever ran into. It felt like, you're on some kind of discovery show and the freaking stage is still there. The Music Mountain stage was there. And that's probably one of the most beloved shows that Garcia aficionados look to, is the 6/16/82 Music Mountain. Great show.
Yeah, I can see why that Roadrunner set to opener absolutely smokes. I mean, that entire show, I'd never heard it before. I was reading your book yesterday and put it on, and my God.
Some nights every song you get a couple extra rounds. You could compare it to versions you've heard in the past. Everything, How Sweet It Is, Catfish John, everything's a couple minutes longer than it normally would be, because Garcia was very happy to be out there in the Catskills. I forget the exact statement, but he's like, Bill Graham used to wait on Mickey Hart's father at the hotels out there, and Garcia was in complete awe of being able to play in the Catskills, which was the Borscht Belt Alps, a great entertainment mecca in the 50s and 60s with all the famous comedians, and it turned into a ghost land. And Music Mountain was like a kind of like a final shot at trying to keep entertainment alive in there, and that didn't work out either. But luckily, we got the Bethel Woods Performing Arts Center out there now, which is kind of,
Great.
giving it some kind of presence, because the music out there and the history of entertainment out there is colossal and important in American history.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's you're right. It's a part of American entertainment history that's not talked about enough. The Borscht Belt era of comedy and music, and yeah, I love that in your book too, how you talk about the history of the areas that you're going to. In Greensboro, you talk about ACC history and the Greensboro Coliseum, things like that. You do the same in Harrisburg on your way out and on your way back, talking about the steel mill and Bethlehem Steel, things like that. I love the way that you bake that into your writing. It makes it a more full and deep reading experience, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the cool thing about the Grateful Dead, we're all like caught up in dates and this and that. So history is like a natural, natural thing that comes from that. When you think back and you have like these great memories of the shows and the times. And I think since you mentioned that, it's a perfect setup to. You haven't got to the chapter yet. The Lake Placid, man, that was the show we were all psyched for. That was the show I was so psyched or the place I was so psyched to go back to in 2022. The Miracle on Ice, and just thinking about where the world was in '83. I
Yeah.
mean, the Soviet Union and the United States were pretty close to a nuclear war back then, and the Miracle on Ice in 1980, and just like history is such an important component of looking back at all that. So yeah, Lake Placid was special, man. Once again, Jerry putting in that extra effort. He knows he's in Lake Placid. He really had a sense of history and being in a special place, and you could hear he would put in that extra effort. The opening Sugaree and the closing deal, that first set, Lake Placid, incredible. And one of the amazing things about my pilgrimage is sometimes you'd go to a place like Herb Brooks Arena, which used to be Olympic Center. It's open to the public. You could set up shop in there. Yeah, I could stay in there, I could listen to the entire tour in that building and just sat in the arena. They let you right in. There's no security. It's like it's a shrine. It's there for the public. And then you go to a place like Madison Square Garden, which is a different kind of shrine. You have to buy a ticket to get in. And for the 10-11-83 show in the year 2022, the Rangers were playing. It was opening night of the hockey season. So I got tickets, went in and listened to the entire show. And it was pretty damn cool because Madison Square Garden was rocking like, it was opening night. The Rangers score and you could feel the garden shake like it would shake during St. Stephen or something. So it was definitely a time out of mind experience, listening to the music and feeling the excitement of a New York City crowd in Madison Square Garden live. So yeah, this whole pilgrimage, it was just interesting the way I had to get into some places. You haven't got to this chapter yet, but for the Worcester show on October 20th, the only way to get into Worcester, which is now the DCU Center, there was a police graduation that morning at 8:30, and I was the only person who wasn't either a cop or a family member of the cop. I just walked right in as if I was there for the graduation and listened to the Grateful Dead show. So it was an adventure finding out how I was going to get in, whether I was going to see cool entertainment or if I was going to have to hang out with cops. But I was going to get in on the anniversary date.
Epic. I applaud your persistence.
And make it an adventure. And that's another thing, Garcia. One of the great statements that I love, and I can't recall it word for word, but he said in 1989, he was being interviewed by Rolling Stone. He said, "You can't hop the freight trains anymore, but you can go to a Grateful Dead show. You could have your tires blown out in the Middle West and catch hell from strangers." And just trying to say that the Grateful Dead were the last great American adventure. And it's so true. Like these days, anywhere you go, you could, you got GPS, you're going to get there. Man, when we went to places like Lake Placid or Alpine Valley, just arriving there was like the greatest thrill. Like, holy shit, we actually made it. This place exists. Where with GPS, you're getting there. There's no adventure to it. It's fun, but everything back then was an adventure. Like the map actually led us here. It took us 2 extra hours, but we got here, man.
So that's a really nice little thing that you just teed up for me. So on Sunday, my dad called me and told me that he's concocting a plan to start driving around the US. He's retired, he's single, he's going to buy a little camper and start traversing the United States. And what I said was, I think that's a great idea. I applaud you. And I started telling him about one of my favorite books of all time, Travels with Charlie by John Steinbeck. And I started quoting it to him. And then I said, it also reminds me of one of my favorite Jerry Garcia quotes. And now I'm going to read from your book because I have it up right here. The quote that you're talking about, let's read it verbatim because it's so wonderful. Quote, "It's an adventure you can still have in America, just like Neil Cassidy on the road. You can't hop the freights anymore, but you can chase the Grateful Dead around. You can have all your tires blow out in some weird town in the Midwest, and you can get help from strangers. You can have something that lasts throughout your life as adventures, the times you took chances. I think that's essential in anybody's life, and it's harder and harder to do in America." Well, it's even harder in today's America for the reasons that you just said. And so the fact that you went out there and did the damn thing in 2022, I just have to applaud you. So again, job well done. And I really hope that everyone will buy The Grateful Pilgrimage. It's available on Amazon right now. You can buy it on Kindle like I did. You can buy a paperback. And go check out Howard's writing because it's excellent. Before I let you go, though, I do want to hear if you have any highlights of what you were listening to at Cornell, because I'm going to do a little concert review after you and I get off. And so I'd like to know what you think were like the high points for you when you were listening. Again, knowing the second set was when you were more focused.
Yeah, I thought the China Cat was pretty ripping. I remember hearing that. It was excellent. The Scarlet had the Scarlet outro was nice. It was long. It developed nice and slow. It was cool. The morning dew seemed pretty hot. Now one of the problems that I ran into, I wasn't running the music. The guy's radio got interrupted as we were listening, so I didn't get to hear the whole jam in its entirety, which is why tonight I'm going back and I'm really gonna like dig into it when it's playing in its entirety tonight. And I'm gonna have my speakers set up. There's gonna be no interruptions. But yeah, it was a lot of really good stuff. The Help Slips was pretty hot. So I think that the things that, and the fire was great too. So that second set was just, the first set I really didn't get to hear as much as I liked, but the entire second set they were just on, man. The energy in the place had to be ridiculous. I seen some pictures. The lighting looked great. It just looked like such a
Yeah,
wild scene in there, man.
they really did.
It would have been one of those shows you would have been crying during, constantly throughout its movie to tears. Definitely, I could see being inside there, and
Absolutely. Last thing for you, and then we got to go. But Dave and I are going to play a game this summer called Estimated Profits, where we're going to guess some songs that are going to come up on the next Dead and Company show. So Dead and Co kicks off their summer tour in Los Angeles a week from Friday. I'd be curious, do you have any song predictions for the first night?
I got to think of what they haven't done to make it interesting. What might they do in Wow, that's tough. Let me think.
I know I really put you on the spot.
What's interesting that they haven't played? What do you think they could?
Well, it's tough because they did Estimated Eyes, China Rider, Help Slip Frank, and Scarlet Fire all during the last show.
They dumped everything at us over there.
Maybe a Lost Sailor Saints.
Victim of a crime lately. I actually I like that too. Man. I'm not even joking. Have they done it? I'm sorry. Have they done it?
No. Maybe a Bust Out.
Yeah, that's why I kind of picked that one. I was looking for one that they hadn't done. But yeah, with Mara O'Teal singing, I love to hear something more O'Teal, man. Just
totally agree. O'Teal's voice is great. I love the passion that he puts into his singing. So let's let O'Teal sing this summer.
And how about some old time Dylan breakouts? Maybe that they haven't done yet.
What about a Baby Blue?
There you go. And Weir has no the man's not shy. He'll sing anything.
Yeah, I think that's true.
And it's a lot of fun. I got to I'm going to be going to some more Dead and Co shows this year, man. It's whatever the next step is for those guys involved. It's going to be cool.
Yeah.
I think Mayer is going to go back to something Dead related, and O'Teal will too. So it might be the end of this configuration, and I think Billy's departure kind of almost make sure that's going to happen. But whatever they started here, I think they're going to continue doing.
And the music never stops, whether it's with Dead and Co or with any of the other bands.
I haven't realized they haven't done. Have they done that lately? Or
no, they haven't. You want to make that one of your calls for this show?
That sounds good. Music never stopped, man. That was always one of my favorites. And I think Mayer could really rip that.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Howard, thank you so much for your time, man. Again, congrats on the book, and be well. I'm sure that we will be in touch.